I wonder if there's even anybody. See some people show up. Give Cecil a little bit of trim here. Welcome to the IDP Blitz, the maiden voyage. Kind of. Not really. Pretty much the same thing, just shorter. All right. Let's go live. 3, 2, 1. How do we sort out the Raiders? Linebackers, that more this week on the IDP Blitz. Matt Schauf at Schauf DS here to help us sort out first the Raiders linebackers.
That's right. And they did that a little bit for us on Monday night. Cory Littleton, Denzel Perriman were the guys who played near full-time, not all the way full-time. 10 tackles apiece. Cory Littleton played 84% of the snaps. Denzel Perriman played 76%. I'm buying Cory Littleton at that level. If he's on the field, he's their best bet. He's still the guy they have the most invested in. If we look back to his Rams days, he's probably still the highest ceiling guy. Denzel Perriman, to me, is a placeholder. He's a fill-in. A week after they traded for him and traded minimal capital to get him, they signed KJ Wright for $3.5 million. So I think that they're trying to get KJ Wright up to the level where he's playing ahead of Denzel Perriman. We'll see if Nicholas Morrow is going to be back in the picture this year. I'm not sure. He's on IR right now with a foot injury. I have no idea what the details are beyond that, so we'll see if he's part of it. But Nick Kwiatkowski is apparently not really part of the picture, played just 24% in the opener. So I'm buying Cory Littleton where he's available. Not really interested beyond that for now.
Try to get their money's worth out of him. And certainly they didn't have to pay KJ Wright nearly as much as they paid Littleton and Kwiatkowski. Lots of hot button issues, Matt, in the IDP world about position eligibility, roles. Player like Jeremy Chinn drafted as a safety. We could talk about his role, talk about how that affects IDP scoring. But first, we want to know, at least in week 1, what was his role?
I mean, it looked pretty similar to what it was last year. There was one of the offseason stories, and it's hard to find offseason IDP stories. That's why we talk about this stuff. But one story was Jeremy Chinn moving from linebacker to safety. It sure looked pretty similar to last year in week 1 to me. He played more than half of his snaps in the box still, played some at deep safety, played some at slot cornerback. So they're going to move Jeremy Chinn around. He's going to get plenty of tackle opportunities. He's going to have big play opportunities because that's the kind of talent he is. So if you drafted Jeremy Chinn, you should feel good about him heading into the season, just as good as you did when you drafted him, because he looks like he's going to be the same guy. He's still on a team with, Shaq Thompson had a good week 1, but they're still limited beyond that at linebacker.
Moving around the league linebacker, the Eagles. And one of the tough things about week 1, Matt, is when you look at quality of opponent, sometimes you have to wonder how valid the results are. But at least when it comes to role and how players are deployed, it's valid no matter what. And even though the Eagles kind of had their way with the Falcons on the road, we did learn about their linebackers and maybe resurgence of defensive line.
Yeah, and we had no way of knowing during camp exactly how things were going to work out. Eric Wilson was the guy that they signed, for, I guess, relatively big money. It was like $2 million, though, so certainly not a contract that guaranteed the playing time. But things sorted out in week 1 the way I expected them to. Eric Wilson played 85% of the snaps. That led the linebackers, the off-ball linebackers for the Eagles. Alex Singleton was next at 60%. TJ Edwards behind him at 40%. So Alex Singleton was actually a little bit closer to TJ Edwards than he was to Eric Wilson. The tackles would tell you that Singleton and Wilson were about the same. And really, I guess based on what we saw from Singleton last year, what we saw from him in preseason, and then even the Falcons game, he's going to be an efficient tackle collector when he's on the field. But even the most efficient tackle collector is not going to be all that usable at 60% playing time. So we'll see if anything changes going forward. But I think the reason they brought in Eric Wilson is because he's better in coverage than the other linebackers that they had. So that's usually the guy that's going to stay on the field. So I'm going to assume that will be the case going forward. And the D-line looked good, especially when they all lined up at the end of the game and kicked through the door at the same time following the sack celebration. 9 QB hits from the group collectively. We got 3 apiece from Javon Hargrave and Hassan Ridgeway at defensive tackle. Hargrave drew raves this summer. He kind of had injuries stunt his beginning to last year after he signed a big free agent deal with the Eagles. So last year kind of a wash. Looks like he's ready to come through this season. I think for a DT required league, Javon Hargrave should certainly be on the radar at this point. We'll see if week 1 just ends up being his biggest game of the year, which it could, but I think he's going to be usable in that kind of format. And then Josh Sweat led the DNs in playing time. I mean, it was close behind him with Brandon Graham, Derek Barnett, and he was just at 54%, so not a huge snap share, but 6 solo tackles, 2 hurries. Josh Sweat was the guy that everybody writing about the Eagles this summer said was headed for a breakout. So, I mean, no reason to go against that based on what we saw in week 1.
Let's do a quick tour around the league, some situations that we're hoping clarify themselves. The Colts, Bobby Okereke wasn't a bright spot. Maybe they're missing Anthony Walker. What's Anthony Walker doing with his new team in Cleveland?
He's the only guy playing full-time at linebacker for the Browns, 95% of snaps in week 1. Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah was the next most used linebacker at 38%. Part of me, I got to be honest, hopes that JOK is a bust just so I don't have to say Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah all that many times and type it out. But he's an exciting player. He's definitely staying on my radar. Obviously, you can't use him, and in most leagues, you can't even roster him at that level of playing time. But once his playing time starts to tick up, I'm definitely paying attention because he's fast. He's got that playmaking flair that if he gets on the field for full time could really make an immediate IDP dent.
Sooner or later, Logan Wilson's going to arrive. Is it sooner, Matt?
I mean, arrive is a strong word, but he's on his way, I guess. Well, I don't know if a Bengals linebacker has ever truly arrived since, like, I don't know, Odell Thurman. Was that the last one? I'm not even sure what has been there since then. But he led the playing time in week 1. Jermaine Pratt put up usable numbers, but was way behind Logan Wilson in playing time. So don't buy it with Jermaine Pratt. If you have Logan Wilson, you know, let's be cautiously optimistic that he can start for us.
What about injured linebackers? I want to ask you about a couple of linebackers that are oft injured. One we're used to having in our lineup. The other hasn't had a big role. How do we handle Christian Kirksey and Nick Vigil?
I say play them as long as they're on the field, because one thing that these guys have done is when they are on the field, they put up tackle numbers for us. Nick Vigil did that for the Vikings in week 1. He played every snap with Anthony Barr out, 10 tackles, 13.9% tackle share, 8 solos, even had a sack for the Vikings in that game against the Bengals. We'll see when Anthony Barr is ready to come back. But, I mean, he tried to return to practice last week after missing most of August with a knee injury, and he couldn't even make it through 1 full workout before missing the next 2 and then missing the game. So I wouldn't bet on Anthony Barr being back for this week. We'll see beyond that. And as long as he's out, Nick Vigil looks like a full-time playing time guy and a good tackle collector. Christian Kirksey, pretty similar. And we don't even have to worry about somebody coming back from injury to unseat him. He was one of I think 17 linebackers that Houston signed this offseason. He's the guy who has emerged as the starter next to Zach Cunningham. He played 100% of the snaps in the opener against Jacksonville. Had solid tackle numbers, just 5 solos, but that tied for the team lead, 14.7% share in that category. 2 tackles for loss, also defensed 2 passes, including an interception. And Kirksey was wearing the green dots. So, I mean, that indicates that they're not planning to take him off the field for any significant amount of time anytime soon. We'll see what his body has to say about that, but as long as he's healthy, we should go ahead and use Kirksey in lineups.
What about Kirksey's old team, old spot with Green Bay? Who are we seeing in a jumbled group at inside linebacker?
I thought it was going to be Chris Barnes, but he played 76% of the snaps in the opener versus 90% for Devondre Campbell. I haven't seen an injury about anybody. You know, a lot of times we learn about injuries when the injury reports start coming out for these defensive guys the following week. So we'll see if there's anything at play here. But we knew it was a jumble going in. We knew they signed Devondre Campbell in free agency after the Cardinals dumped him. So it's not a shock to see Campbell ahead of Barnes, even though I was guessing it was Barnes. It's also probably a fluid situation. We'll kind of see where playing time goes. At the moment, I think they're both usable in deeper leagues, and neither one is exciting. But if you're choosing between them, I think you got to lean Campbell.
And if you're choosing IDP coverage, make sure you check out everything that Matt Schauf is doing at Draft Sharks, SCHAUFDS. And Football Guys, we've got IDP projections and lots of other things to cover you. Also, remember to subscribe to the free daily newsletter at join.footballguys.com. Rounding out our week 1 topics, again, folks, got the IDP Blitz here. Next week, the return of John Norton, and we'll be playing home and homes with these guys as we go through the season. Let's talk about some week 1 surprises, Matt. Okay. Certainly, one of the stories out of Seattle was Darrell Taylor. It looks like in Darrell Taylor, they have found their new Leo in that offense. But what about Rasheem Green, a 3rd-round pick, maybe a little bit of a reach? Seattle were looking for pass rush production. Can Green provide it?
Yeah, and the problem for us with Darrell Taylor is he didn't play enough snaps for us to use him, but he probably helps Seattle more than he's going to help us. Rasheem Green, though, played 70% of the defensive snaps against the Colts. It's just the fourth time in his career that he's reached that level of playing time, 70%. Twice all last year. He only played half of last season because he started the year on IR. So maybe he was headed for that kind of role in his third season. Now in his fourth year, Green hasn't really delivered anything that we can, project as usable yet. He had 12 quarterback hits through 36 games through his first 3 years heading into this season, but still just 24. So maybe he's finally rounding into form now. Maybe he'll be something for this year's Seahawks. 2 quarterback hits, 1 sack against the Colts in that game. So again, we'll see. I think this week is a maybe upside matchup against the Titans for deeper leagues. I would try not to trust Rasheem Green in, more average size or shallower leagues. But, there's a chance that he delivers against the team that just allowed 5 sacks to Chandler Jones. There's also a chance that he's not Chandler Jones.
Yeah, right. Oh, man. Chandler Jones. The Q's fan in me just soaked that up. One of the best individual days you'll see somebody have. Go ahead. Give some upstate New York love for Chandler Jones.
That's right. Well, I mean, did you see afterward where Taylor Lewan was like, "Thank you, Chandler Jones, for exposing me. I played poorly today." So he's not going to be happy this time around. Might be to Rasheem Green and everybody else in Seattle's detriment.
Yeah, it's really going to be an interesting one to watch, those week 2 data points. Week 2 data points will help us also looking back at a couple of week 1 surprises that are going to face each other. A couple of safeties on Thursday night. Cameron Curl, breakout player in IDP leagues last year. Jabrill Peppers, depending on if you have return yards, he can be a very helpful player. Are they going to help our IDP teams, at least based on week 1?
Jabrill Peppers is certainly going to need those return yards to help you if you get those in your league, because he didn't do it playing time wise on defense. 45% snap share on defense for Jabrill Peppers in week 1. Struggled in coverage. The tight ends for the Broncos ran pretty freely in that game. So, I mean, we'll see if it's just a matter of benching him during one poor game. But the fact that that's even a possibility in the first game of the season scares me about Jabrill Peppers. I'm certainly not using him until I see a full game's worth of playing time going forward, because the thing that changed at safety for the Giants is Xavier McKinney is now healthy and part of the picture. He played 95% to lead Giants safeties. Logan Ryan's also there, kind of a safety corner hybrid. So, I mean, they don't have to have Jabrill Peppers playing full-time if he's doing something they don't like. So I'm going to wait and see on him and lean towards Xavier McKinney until then. And Logan Ryan, of course. Cameron Curl, he started that game for Washington against the Chargers, but he only played 46% of the time. Landon Collins was in at 80%. He, of course, is back from the Achilles tendon tear that knocked him out and made Cameron Curl a thing last year. But the relative no-name, I guess, was Bobby McCain leading Washington safeties at 85% playing time in week 1. Landon Collins got back to playing in the box at least. We'd like to see him at 100% or close to 100% playing time, so we'll see where that goes going forward. But we like that he played a little bit more than half of his snaps in the box after playing a little bit more than we anticipated at deep safety throughout the preseason. But Cameron Curl, another guy that we can't really use until we see that he's back to full playing time.
You won't be a no-name in your IDP league. Check out the IDP Blitz. Again, check out everything Matt Schauf is doing over at Draft Sharks, SCHAUFDS, and everything we got going on the IDP team at footballguys.com. We want to serve you the best always, folks, because you're so classy.